often what I find is that when women who are seeking that freedom and that sense of independence, and they have the feeling that they have someone very committed, and they do have the sense of being free to be who they are, they're actually open to marriage. But then again, that's also a person's individual decision. I think the big piece that's coming out of this is the feeling of freedom to choose what's best and to have the permission to do it without having judgment or shame placed upon them because they're choosing a certain route.
Welcome back to the Empowered Woman, Badass, and Unfiltered podcast. Your host, Olivia, here. And this is season 9, the most impactful guest season. And I have Britta Neinast here with me today, and I'm so happy. We did a podcast together like over a year ago, and I learned so much about parenting in this podcast, and also just how like shifts happen and different shifts happen in women's lives. Going into the shift from being a parent to a mentor. That's one thing that I have consistently like asked people when they've got their 20-something-year-old kids, like, how is it going into that mentorship stage for you? Like, and they're just like, at first they're like, what? Some people that don't know me, they're like, what? And then others are like, oh, it's really hard or whatever and stuff like that. But, now Britta's done so much has changed. As if you've listened to any of the other past podcasts with any of my other impactful guests, life is always evolving. So we've got her here today to talk about how she's evolved and changed and get more knowledge from her. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's always exciting to see you again. I love chatting with you. We've been back and forth with different things, so it's always fun. Thanks.
Of course. So yes, tell me more about what you do now.
Oh, goodness. Everything, it's like you said, everything is evolving, and there's always new things to learn, to grow, to step into. My focus has always been geared around women in relationships and the relationships they have with their children, the relationships they have with their adult children. I love that you said that, because there is a shifting into being a mentor to your children as they grow into adulthood. But the most significant relationship is really that intimate partner relationship. And that's what really helps us to understand who we are on a deep level. And they challenge us in ways that we don't always like. So actually, over the years, I've been growing and delving into relationships with women who are married or in relationships and struggling to stay or go, and trying to figure out how to really feel understood in their relationship.
Listen, as divorced, like, okay, I'm not gonna lie. I did a podcast episode with the vice president of global marketing operations for Google, and we talked about having a good divorce because she wrote a book on it, and they still have a very good relationship for the child. They're amicable. They can go to parent-teacher meetings and not be petty. They can be adults and understand that their child comes first in that situation. I'm happy to be talking about this because it's I am so pro marriage, and she's very pro marriage too. And the reason it's like we have that conversation is because it's not, divorce is common. In 2022, we've had 44% of marriages end in divorce. It's gone down a little bit, but still that's a little high, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Well,
it's gone down, but not as many people are getting married. So we have to actually look at all the stats.
Yeah.
Because it gives the illusion that it's getting better when really people are avoiding getting married in the first place. It's gone down like 3% in the last 2 years, so yeah.
And I mean, I told my husband the other night, like this morning or something, I'm like, do you know how lucky we are to like have each other and not be dating right now?
Yeah.
Because
people are opting to have relationships without necessarily being married. And I misquoted 3%. It's gone down 3 points from 2000 to 2022.
Okay.
But what people are doing is creating relationships without that feeling of that marriage certificate. And they're trying to create relationships in the way that works best for themselves. And it's breaking some of the traditional ideas.
Mhm.
And I love it. I think that people need permission to figure out what is the best way to have this relationship that's going to be the best for these two people,
Yeah.
and to create it and then have permission to do it.
Yeah.
It's actually happier when people are able to be free to decide what's best for them.
Oh, and people absolutely should. And I mean, I want to get into this a little more. So what are some of the new trends you're seeing in relationships?
Then there's it's funny because when I work with clients, I really talk a lot about the history of relationships. And I start back in the 40s just to really get into this sense of how we have evolved as men and women in our relationships. And I come from the perspective of heterosexual, but this is also in gay relationships too. This isn't gender specific. So these same dynamics show up in all types of relationships. And so the trends are that women are the ones who are more likely to initiate divorce, that women are now having extramarital affairs more as often or more than men, when it used to be the other way around, and that women are opting to stay out of marriage but be in relationships and not get married rather than choosing becoming married. And so a lot of those shifts are happening because there is a shift in having the freedom to decide what's best for her and for the relationship. And it's really creating a lot of empowerment. But it's also creating some challenges.
Yeah, because I'm such a traditionalist.
Yeah.
I guess in this sense of like being married, I think it's because I see the benefits of like having someone that I feel like is truly committed
Yeah.
to making what we have work, to going through life together. And I know that it doesn't have to just have marriage on it. I know that. I know, but for me, I'm such like I got married at 23.
Mhm.
So I always knew from a young age that I wanted to be married. But I understand that like my sister, she's not like that. Like she's and that's okay. I'm not saying it's not okay. It's just I'm really here eager to learn more so about this, because a lot of the friends that I have too, they're so like for marriage itself. Um
And that it works. I think what's important to remember is that if you still have that traditional concept and you want to have that, and that's what you're seeking is best for you, then create it.
mhm,
What's happening is other women who don't, really connect with that
yeah.
have the freedom to choose something different. And this is what I think we're breaking the mold of how it's supposed to be and allowing for everyone to discover what's best for themselves. Very often, what I find is that when women who are seeking that freedom and that sense of independence, and they have the feeling that they have someone very committed and they do have the sense of being free to be who they are, they're actually open to marriage. But then again, that's also a person's individual decision. I think the big piece that's coming out of this is the feeling of freedom to choose what's best and to have the permission to do it without having judgment or shame placed upon them because they're choosing a certain route. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
we have definitely changed, because I mean since the 40s it's like
Absolutely. Well, the 40s with the war, it sparked a lot of this because the men went off to war and the women went out into the workforce. And that was the
yeah.
first time in a very long time that women had this idea that I can be part of the economic system. So this whole thing is what sparked a lot that led into all kinds of shifts in our culture over the last several decades.
And there's no one set way to live.
Nope.
There's no, it has to be this. No, it's really about what works for you.
Mhm.
So you help women find out what works best for them, right?
I do.
Okay. So
Many women have followed the traditional route and then they realized or have gotten into a situation where they realize that this is really not for them or they're not really sure. So I get to help them explore who they really are and what they're really looking for. And sometimes that's a deeper dive into making the marriage work. And sometimes it's a deep dive into an honest conversation that it might be time to gracefully leave and create something different for her. The beauty is that I'm not attached to any decision because it's not my decision for them. Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you just help and guide.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what's an exercise that, let's say somebody's listening and they want to, they're having challenges in their marriage. What is like a first step or a process that you go through when someone first comes to you?
Well, the process that I go through is really exploring much more deeply what is it that they want, what is it that they feel that they're missing. And we start talking a lot more clearly about what it is that they expected and what's not meeting that expectation and why. Because sometimes their expectations are valid and they just have gone about it in the wrong way or not helpful way. And sometimes their expectations are not really in line with what would be realistic. So we have to clear that up first. Because if you're not clear in your relationships, it's usually because you're not clear in what you want, what you're expecting, and then how to make that happen. So we break that apart and create a plan to decide what we want to do moving forward. So that's that first step, is to really break it down and figure out where the holes are in the process, what's missing.
I'm taking notes.
That's okay. That's great.
This actually reminds me of a conversation I was having with a new bartender at the restaurant, and everybody knows that I do coaching. So everybody also feels very comfortable to talk to me. And she was just like, I don't know if I'm fulfilled in my relationship. She's 24. And I was like, well, do you want to just vent or do you want my advice? Because I'm not about to invest all, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
also,
you have to ask permission, right?
Ask permission. I'm not about to waste time doing that, just me. And also, I really want to know, where she's at with this process. And then I just asked her some questions. I'm like, so what's going on, and I asked her that expectation, what is it that you exactly want from a relationship? Have you set clear expectations? Or are you setting goals for something that have no endpoint? So I love that you established that right off the bat, because it's so important, because I'm real guilty of this.
Yeah.
I always want things to be better. I'm always continually trying to improve. So I'm working on contentment myself. And in marriage, it's like, okay, I can get this done, this and this done. But if this isn't right, I'm complaining. Like I'm just being honest here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like
that's what we do.
And but I've learned through the years, I've got to learn how to communicate better. There's certain things that I'm just better at than he is, and there's things that he's better at than I am, and allowing each other to work in our own wheelhouses.
That's
but
big.
Setting those clear expectations of what I want, that's something that I've definitely had to work on.
Oh, we all do. We're kind of taught and told a lot of things that create expectations that are not really that are not realistic. And this happens for men and women. And again, some of the history that I go through and how we socialize men and women, when I work with clients, we do a deep dive on how we got where we are. Because the way that we are socialized to expect things is so different than the way men are socialized. And then we get into adulthood, creating a relationship, and we think it's supposed to work. And it doesn't. And we're both going, what happened? I was doing what I thought was going to happen, and so is he. But those expectations are completely different because we're taught differently. And so then we have to actually break down the things we thought we knew and then build it up in a way that's healthier for both. And then you can create a plan. So it's a little bit of deconstruction that has to happen at the beginning, because we're all going into this with, blinders on.
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know.
Actually, absolutely. We don't even know what to ask sometimes.
Seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would love to hear about a success story from someone that you've helped with their relationship.
I would love to. I love my success stories. They're my favorite, of course, because this is what we do. What I love is when I can see the difference in a couple, but not just with her, but with him. Because women are taught and trained to reach out for help, to ask for help, to say, hey, I need something here. And we are also socialized to connect. So connection is of high value. Well, men are often socialized for independence, freedom, and to be that fixer who doesn't need to ask for help. Now, that's a very stereotypical idea. There are obviously men and women who, might be opposite of this particular, pattern. But by and large, women will come in for help and men will. So when I get a couple and he comes in, then we get to really do some fun stuff. And when he's really on board and changes his perspective and he's open, it's an amazing realization of the power that he has to be that male and masculine for her, and how her energy matches and when it comes together. And I have a couple that I've been working with for a little over a year now. And I actually was just in session with him this week. And all he's doing is raving about how different this is, how so, at peace he feels, and how much his anger he knew got in the way of making her not feel safe, because that's the one thing men are socialized to allow to feel is anger, right? Everything else gets squashed down. So once he realized there was such a freedom in that, he said, it's like I've never knew this. And he said, all men need to know this. And I loved it because, when men see this and tell their friends, they can break that stereotypical message that so many men are getting. And that happened just recently, and they are doing better than ever. It's amazing.
I love that. I love that for them. I love that for you, because it's when like, what you're doing, but like when people actually take it and implement it and they see how their lives have changed, because it's like you got into this to help women have better lives and men too. But yes. I mean, as a result, you work with predominantly women. That's why I said that.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like, when you improve the life of a woman that's loving and giving and caring, most women are, they're improving the lives of the people around them as well.
Yes, and absolutely.
Allowing for those things to for their relationships to flourish. And I mean, and especially in the time of the world that we're in now, where divorce is a thing, and having people committed to want to fight for the success of their relationship.
Yeah.
And being able to help them through that process. It has to be so rewarding.
It really is. And here's the interesting thing. When you give people permission to say, yes, I want a divorce, it actually opens them up to considering, do I really want the divorce? It's an interesting thing, because when people get too stuck in saying, no, I'm going to make this work, I'm going to make this work, I'll do whatever I can, there's almost a sense of taking back their freedom to choose. And when we have a sense of freedom, that's when we can be in our best self, our most empowered self. So when women have permission to say, I think I might want to walk away, it gets to open the conversation. It doesn't mean that they're going to. Yeah. It just means they're contemplating it. And this is actually what happened in the couple that I worked with. He was going to leave at one point, and then they worked it out, and then she was going to, so this was a bit of back and forth, but having permission to say, I don't want you here if you don't want to be, but I want you here. If you're willing to do this, I'm going to give it 100%. And that's freedom. And that's what love really is. It's not about binding people. It's about freedom to be there and choosing. That's a
Yeah.
gift.
Yeah. That having the freedom of choice, I definitely, and I mean, I'm such a prude, rigid person. Such a like,
How so?
but
I don't see that in you.
well, I just feel like I'm so like the way that I was okay. My grandparents were Jehovah's Witnesses, so there were some things in me
It's a lot
that
of
are like
influence.
so like restrictive and strict that are really subconscious.
Absolutely.
And so, but I mean, I'm like I said, I'm very open-minded and open to learning more about how other people, see things. And so like that's why I'm so like, because I'm like, I've been trying to take divorce off the table for the longest time.
Yeah.
Because I know it's an option. Like I know it's something I can do. It's not necessarily something I've wanted.
Yeah.
But knowing that it didn't come from an egoic state of like, I want to, because I found when my husband deployed, I really realized the false confidence that I had from being married.
Mm. In what
Um,
way?
oh well, because I had a person,
Got
and
it.
I didn't like, I was like confident, but like there was some false confidence there. But then it's like I was working on myself and able to just really be in my own power.
Mm.
I was also training for a bikini competition then. So it was just like
Nice.
I was like super fit. I was like running up like stairs and having so many rocky moments, eating super strict, living a fun life, and it really like enjoying being by myself and getting to know myself. Missing my husband, of
Oh,
course.
sure.
But like just learning more about myself and then realizing like I thought I was confident in certain areas, but I wasn't that confident. And then I developed this confidence um through that process, and continuing to like build upon that.
Being on your
Um
own, you mean, with him being deployed
yeah, and
and you,
then
yeah, and having your own space like that?
just like my relationship with God, definitely I have a very strong relationship with God, and that really started me really focusing more so on that,
Mm.
and my confidence coming from that in itself, and just from just being like I am who I am. I'm made the way that I'm
Absolutely.
supposed to be made. And yes, while I can continually improve, and that's the type of person I am, um, I am enough with who I am. I don't need to compare myself to anybody else. I don't need to, because comparison's like a huge thing, especially like in my
It's so
demographic
big.
of people. Like, I think that so many, like nobody else has had to see their high school friends from like 10 years ago or whatever, like when they were in their 30s and starting their lives and really getting established, they didn't have to see all the accomplishments of the people that they really don't spend time with. They didn't have that like pushed in their face like my generation does. And we compare ourselves so much more now than
Yeah, me
women
too.
and men that I know that are more mature and didn't have to do that. I think psychologically, social media has done that to us. I also think that and I mean I'm more open and aware of like my triggers and stuff like that now too. But yeah, no, false confidence was definitely
Well,
something
we
that
all
I
have a
was.
lot of that goes back to the sense of expectations, right? When you talked earlier about if we have certain expectations and they get met, then we tend to have this confidence. And then when they don't, we tend to not, right? So our confidence is connected to this idea that expectations are going to be met. And there is a false sense of confidence in it because, we can hope for the best, but we can't create demands or expectation on one another, right? And then the idea of comparing, that is huge. If one person sees another and sees marriage as the end all be all, but doesn't feel that for themselves, the freedom to be able to say, that's not for me, the comparing. Some of that comparing is hugely happening on social media, and a lot of the shaming that's going on, and that's one of the biggest things that I really enforce in my sessions or anytime I work with clients is this is a no blame, no shame zone. Your experience is based on everything that you had growing up and what you learned in society and culture, right? So all of that makes you who you are and the way that you see things. And the idea is to be open and willing to consider that other people might not see it the same, and that's okay too. So that way we have the freedom to be who we are and not feel, what's that, paranoia, right? People they compare and then they get paranoid with it because they're not the same. Yeah, we have to really be aware of what that does to us psychologically. It's very heavy.
Yeah, like if you're especially if you're not in the right like mental space, it's just it can be very detrimental. And I've experienced that myself. I also
Yeah.
now I look at things and like they'll be talking about how people like I find people calling more people out for how they are on social media.
Mhm.
And
Are you
people
mean
want
in
to,
like a negative way or?
yeah, like, why
Yeah,
are you talking about a teenager, how a teenager looks?
yeah,
Like, why are you talking about, this and this and that, calling people out for being rude, calling people out
gotcha.
for, and if people actually said in real life what they say online, like I saw a TikTok about that and she was just like, oh, your house? I like some of it, but not like all of it. Why would you get that rug? Like, why? Like,
Yes,
this is
yes.
I just wanted you to know you've got a really long torso. I saw this and I'm just like,
Wow.
yeah, no, like the things people will say
And
to,
feel like okay with it because we've gotten so comfortable at saying it online. So we are more conditioned to be able to just say it, right? Without thinking of the impact, how that might make others feel.
but like you wouldn't say that to a person in person, you
No.
know?
And it shows up in relationships all the time.
But how someone interacts on social does show how they think in a specific way. And I forgot how it was explained, but and the reason I'm talking about this is because I'm one of those people that I do like want to look at somebody's social media and see what
They're
what do
all
you
about.
find funny? You know what I'm saying? What a lot of people, they just show their highlight reels. They just show what they think is a highlight reel. So, okay, what do you think is a highlight reel? What is the image that you want to portray to the rest of the world? And then when I meet you in person, or I see you in person or whatever, are you really who you say you are online? Or are you living under a certain facade? And I've gotten it's a whole different like dynamic that goes into that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's like it's now it's becoming the way that we kind of interact
We're
with
looking
each
for
other.
more authenticity, right? We're trying to see, are you who you say you are? And, we're looking for that more because we are so much more out there. And in relationships, what we really do want is authenticity. And the only way to do that is to know who you are.
And that's why every time like my friend is like, oh, I'm thinking about dating this guy. What's his social? I want to see it.
Right.
Like, no, like I'm that person. Okay. If a guy shows me a girl, a guy friend, I'm okay. I need to see her social because and I'm so critical. I'm so critical. Why am I this way? But
Everybody is. We have a tendency. I think it's important to, we have to look at the good side of this though, right? Because we want to balance it with, there's an upside to it, but there's also a downside, right? The downside is We may look at it from a judgmental, shaming, critical lens. But the upside to it is just getting a feel of a person because you really want to get to know that person, right? So there's value that can happen if you know and are in touch with your motivation. Because it's what I tell my clients all the time. When you ask your spouse a question, know your motivation and always make sure it's coming from a truly heartfelt, connected place. Because we manipulate so much. You have to be in touch with what is your real motivation here. So that's where you get to see one another and start to understand one another when your motivation is truly to see and understand. If it's coming from something else, it's not going to go well.
So, Britta, how can people get in contact with you if they're interested in your services? And I'm just, just a crazy person here.
No, if anybody's looking to really get clear on their marriage, their relationship, and what they want to do moving forward, you can go to healingwithbritta.com is my website, and then click on the link and schedule a clarity call, and we can dive in and take a look. And at the very least, you'll end with some idea of a plan moving forward. So healingwithbritta.com.
And guys, that's in the links. Links are in the show notes or description box below, wherever you're getting this information from. You always have me thinking from such a different perspective, and I love that about you, and I greatly appreciate it. And knowing the steps and knowing that there is hope for you and your relationship. And knowing that it doesn't have to look like anybody else's.
That's the beauty of it. And really what we're doing is learning how to connect, but we have to first know ourselves before we can connect with someone else. And it's actually not as hard as people think it is. We make it far harder. So once we clear all the difficulty out, we find it's actually a breath of fresh air. It's much easier.
Oh, yeah, it's a process. No, it's a process. No,
it is a process. No, it takes work. It takes work because we have to undo a lot of stuff, but it becomes easier and easier over time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I love having you and love your energy as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Empowered Woman, Badass and Unfiltered podcast. If you found any value in this, please consider sharing and subscribing. Now go out and be a badass.